You think self-control is some grand switch you flip one day and suddenly become unstoppable? That's why you're still average. That's why you keep breaking your own promises. You're addicted to the fantasy of transformation, not the reality of it. Real control isn't built in big moments. It's built in the smallest, most boring decisions, the ones you keep ignoring because they don't feel important enough to post about. That's your first mistake. You've been trained to chase intensity, not consistency. And intensity is a liar. Let me expose something most people are too weak to understand. Speaking in tongues isn't some mystical nonsense. It's what happens when your mind and actions stop negotiating. It's when your behavior starts communicating a language your weak self can't even understand anymore. You stop saying, "I'll try," and your actions start saying, "I execute." Every small decision, waking up on time, saying no to distractions, finishing what you start becomes a word in that language. And over time, you build a vocabulary of dominance, not motivation, not hype, execution. Right now, your problem isn't lack of knowledge, it's lack of control. You know what to do, but you don't do it. That means your identity is weak, and identity isn't changed by big declarations. It's carved through repetition. Every time you choose discipline over comfort, you're rewriting who you are. Every time you fail to act, you're reinforcing weakness. There is no neutral. Every small decision is a vote, and you've been voting against yourself for years. You want power? Then understand this. Power is quiet. It's built in moments nobody sees. It's built when you don't check your phone, when you don't quit early, when you don't give in to your own excuses. These decisions are microscopic, but they stack like bricks. And eventually you either build a fortress or you bury yourself under your own weakness. Most men choose the second option because it's easier to lie to themselves than to face the truth. And here's the brutal truth: you don't lack potential. You lack standards. You tolerate your own weakness. You negotiate with your own discipline. You say, "just this once," like it doesn't matter. But it always matters, because that once becomes your identity. That's how losers are created. Not in one big failure, but in thousands of small surrenders. When you build real self-control, something shifts. You stop relying on feelings. You stop needing motivation. You move differently. Your actions become automatic. You don't debate. You execute. That's the language of dominance. That's speaking in tongues. A level of alignment where your thoughts, actions, and identity are so synchronized that hesitation disappears. Weak men can't understand it because they've never experienced true control. You keep waiting for a defining moment to change your life, but that moment never comes. What actually defines you is far less dramatic and far more brutal. It's the quiet, repetitive decisions you make when nobody is watching and nobody is praising you. The problem is, you've been conditioned to ignore those moments because they don't feel powerful. They don't look impressive. They don't give you instant validation. But that's exactly why they matter more than anything else. Every small decision you make is a signal, not to the world, but to yourself. When you choose to wake up on time instead of hitting snooze, you're not just starting your day earlier. You're proving to your own mind that you follow through. When you decide to finish a task instead of delaying it, you're reinforcing a standard. And when you avoid distractions, even for a few minutes longer than usual, you're training your brain to accept control instead of chaos. These moments are subtle, but they stack relentlessly. You don't notice the change immediately, but your identity is being rewritten in real time. Here's where most people get it completely wrong. They think identity is something you declare. It's not. It's something you demonstrate. You can say you're disciplined, focused, and driven all day long, but if your actions don't match, your mind doesn't believe you. And once your mind stops believing you, you lose internal authority. That's when excuses start to feel valid. That's when laziness starts to feel justified. That's when you become inconsistent, not because you lack ability, but because you've trained yourself to distrust your own words. The real danger is how easy it is to overlook these small decisions. Skipping one workout doesn't seem like a big deal. Wasting an hour on your phone feels harmless. Delaying a task until tomorrow feels reasonable. But these aren't isolated events. They are patterns forming. And patterns are what shape identity. Every time you repeat a weak decision, you're reinforcing a version of yourself that operates below your potential. You're building habits that don't just affect your day, but define your character. Understand this clearly: there is no neutral ground. You are either building discipline or eroding it. Every action you take moves you in one direction or the other. You don't stay the same. You either sharpen your edge or dull it. That's why small decisions carry so much weight. They are constant, they are unavoidable, and they are always shaping you, whether you're aware of it or not. What separates controlled individuals from everyone else isn't talent or intelligence, it's their respect for these small moments. They treat minor decisions with the same seriousness as major ones because they understand the long-term consequences. They don't rely on mood or motivation, they rely on standards. And those standards show up in the smallest details: how they manage their time, how they respond to discomfort, how they handle tasks they don't feel like doing. If you want to build real control, you have to stop chasing big changes and start dominating small choices. You have to raise your standards in the moments that feel insignificant, because those moments are not insignificant. They are the foundation. Ignore them and you stay stuck. Master them and everything else follows. You don't have a discipline problem. You have a negotiation problem. Every time you hesitate, every time you tell yourself, I'll do it later, you're entering a conversation you were never supposed to have. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The moment you start negotiating with yourself, you've already positioned weakness as an option. Strong individuals don't waste energy debating what needs to be done. They decide once, and then they execute without discussion. Look at your daily behavior closely. How often do you delay something you already know you should do? Not because it's impossible, but because you don't feel like doing it right now. That internal dialogue is where control breaks. You start justifying, rationalizing, softening the standard. 5 more minutes won't hurt. I'll do it tomorrow. I need to feel ready. This isn't logic. It's avoidance disguised as reasoning. And the more you allow it, the more your mind learns that your decisions are optional. This is where most people destroy their own authority. When you tell yourself you're going to do something and then don't follow through, you send a clear message to your brain. Your words have no weight. Over time, this erodes trust. Not external trust, internal trust. You stop believing yourself. And once that happens, discipline becomes almost impossible because you've trained your mind to expect inconsistency. You've proven repeatedly that you don't mean what you say. The solution isn't more motivation. It's removing the conversation entirely. Decisions should be final, not flexible. When you set a task, a schedule, or a standard, it should not be up for debate when the moment arrives. There is no "do I feel like it?" There is only "this is what I do." That shift from emotional decision-making to identity-based execution is what separates controlled individuals from everyone else. Understand how dangerous negotiation really is. It doesn't just delay action, it rewires your behavior. Every time you give yourself permission to bend the rules, you weaken the structure that holds your discipline together. It's like loosening bolts in a machine. At first, nothing seems wrong, but over time, everything becomes unstable. Eventually, the system fails not because of one major breakdown, but because of repeated small compromises. You need to become decisive at a level that feels uncomfortable. When it's time to act, you act. No delay, no internal debate, no impulsive interference. The action itself becomes automatic because the decision was already made. This is how high-performing individuals operate. They don't rely on willpower in the moment. They rely on pre-committed standards that eliminate hesitation. There's also a deeper layer to this. Negotiation feeds weakness because it gives your lower impulses a voice. The part of you that seeks comfort, distraction, and avoidance becomes louder every time you listen to it. And the more you entertain that voice, the stronger it becomes. Eventually, it dominates your behavior. You start living reactively instead of intentionally, driven by what feels easy instead of what is necessary. If you want control, you have to silence that voice through action, not argument. You don't overcome weakness by reasoning with it. You overcome it by ignoring it. The moment you feel resistance is the exact moment you act, not later, not after thinking it through, immediately. That's how you break the pattern. That's how you reestablish authority over your own behavior. Most people won't do this because it removes comfort. It removes flexibility. It forces accountability. But that's the price of control. You either accept that your decisions are final, or you accept that your life will always be dictated by how you feel in the moment. You keep waiting to feel ready, waiting for that surge of motivation to carry you forward like a wave. That's the trap. Motivation feels powerful, but it's unstable, unpredictable, and completely unreliable under pressure. The days you need to perform the most are usually the days you feel it the least. If your system depends on motivation, you've already built it on something that disappears the moment things get uncomfortable. Look at your own patterns. On the days you feel inspired, you move fast, you take action, you believe in yourself. But the moment that feeling fades, everything slows down. You hesitate, you delay, you start making excuses that sound reasonable but lead nowhere. This isn't a coincidence. It's the natural consequence of relying on an emotional state to drive consistent behavior. Emotions fluctuate. Standards don't, unless you let them. Discipline operates on a completely different level. It doesn't care how you feel. It doesn't wait for the perfect mood. It functions on structure, routine, and commitment. When something is part of your discipline, it gets done regardless of internal resistance. That's what makes it powerful. It removes uncertainty. It removes dependency on conditions you can't control. You don't need to be in the right mindset. You just need to follow the system you've already set. The problem is most people misunderstand discipline. They think it's about forcing themselves through pain with sheer willpower. That's not sustainable. Real discipline is built through repetition and clarity. You decide what needs to be done, you define when it gets done, and you repeat it until it becomes automatic. Over time, the action requires less effort, not more. It becomes part of your baseline, not something you struggle to initiate. Motivation, on the other hand, creates a cycle of inconsistency. It gives you bursts of energy followed by long periods of inaction. You feel productive for a short time, then you crash. You start again, then stop again. This cycle destroys progress because consistency is what compounds results. Without it, you're always starting over, always rebuilding momentum you should have never lost in the first place. There's also a deeper issue with relying on motivation that conditions you to act only when something feels good. That's a dangerous standard because the most important actions in your life won't feel good in the moment. They'll feel uncomfortable, repetitive, even boring. If you're waiting for excitement to carry you through those moments, you'll avoid them. And when you avoid them, you avoid growth. Discipline removes that problem entirely. It replaces emotional triggers with structured behavior. You don't ask yourself if you want to do the work. You don't evaluate your mood. You follow the plan. This creates stability in your actions, which leads to stability in your results. Over time, that stability builds confidence, not the fragile kind based on temporary success, but the kind rooted in knowing you can rely on yourself. High-level performers don't operate based on how they feel when they wake up. They operate based on what needs to be executed. Their routines are fixed. Their standards are non-negotiable. They've eliminated the question of, do I feel like it, from their decision-making process. That question doesn't exist in their system because it's irrelevant. The task is already decided. The only thing left is execution. If you're serious about control, you need to remove motivation from the equation entirely. Not because it's useless, but because it's inconsistent. You can't build a reliable life on something that comes and goes without warning. You need something stronger, something that holds under pressure, something that doesn't break when things get difficult. That something is discipline. And until you build it, you'll always be at the mercy of your own emotions. You say you're focused, disciplined, committed, but your actions tell a completely different story. That's the disconnect you keep ignoring. Words are cheap, effortless, and often meaningless. Actions are expensive. They require effort, consistency, and sacrifice. And that's exactly why your actions are the only thing that define you. Not what you plan, not what you promise, not what you post, what you repeatedly do. There's a harsh reality most people avoid facing. Your life is not shaped by your intentions. It's shaped by your behavior. You can have the best plans in the world, the clearest vision, the strongest desire to improve. But if your actions don't align, none of it matters. Your mind doesn't reward intention, it rewards execution. And every time your actions contradict your words, you weaken your own credibility with yourself. Pay attention to how this plays out daily. You tell yourself you'll start early, but you delay. You say you'll stay focused, but you get distracted. You commit to consistency, but you break it the moment something feels inconvenient. These are not random slips. They are patterns. And those patterns form a language, one that speaks louder than anything you say. That language is your behavior, and right now, it might be communicating inconsistency, hesitation, and lack of control. The dangerous part is how easy it is to hide behind words. You can convince yourself that you're serious because you think about your goals constantly. You can feel productive without actually producing anything. You can talk about discipline without ever practicing it. This creates a false sense of progress. You feel like you're moving forward, but in reality, you're standing still. And over time, that illusion becomes your comfort zone. Strong individuals don't rely on verbal commitment. They rely on visible patterns. They understand that repetition is proof. If something is truly part of who you are, It shows up in your daily actions without exception. Not occasionally, not when it's convenient, consistently. That consistency is what builds identity. Not what you claim, but what you demonstrate over time. There's also a deeper psychological layer to this. Your brain is constantly observing your behavior and forming conclusions about who you are. When your actions are aligned with your words, it strengthens internal trust. You start believing in your own standards. You become more decisive, more confident, more control. But when your actions contradict your words, that trust breaks. You start doubting yourself. You hesitate more. You lower your standards without even realizing it. This is why action is the only language that matters. It eliminates ambiguity. It removes the possibility of self-deception. You can't lie through consistent behavior. Either you do the work or you don't. Either you follow through or you don't. There is no middle ground. And that clarity is powerful because it forces you to confront reality instead of hiding behind intention. If you want to elevate your level of control, you need to shift your focus completely. Stop measuring yourself by what you think or say. Start measuring yourself by what you execute. Track your actions with brutal honesty, not selectively, not when it benefits your ego. Every day, because that's where the truth is. High-level performers don't waste time explaining their plans. Their actions speak so clearly that explanation becomes unnecessary. Their consistency becomes their identity. Their execution becomes their reputation. And most importantly, their behavior becomes something they can rely on, regardless of external conditions. You don't need better words. You need stronger actions. Until those align, nothing changes. You keep chasing comfort like it's a reward, like it's something you've earned. That mindset is exactly what's keeping you stuck. Comfort is not a prize, it's a trap. It feels safe, predictable, and easy, but that's precisely why it destroys progress. The moment you start prioritizing comfort, you start avoiding the very things that force you to grow. And growth is never comfortable. Not at the beginning, not in the middle, not even at the highest level. Look at your daily decisions with honesty. How often do you choose the easier option simply because it requires less effort? You delay difficult tasks, you avoid pressure, you escape into distractions that demand nothing from you. It feels harmless in the moment, almost justified. But those choices are shaping your standard. Every time you pick comfort over challenge, you're reinforcing a version of yourself that avoids resistance. And avoidance becomes a habit faster than you realize. The problem with comfort is not just that it slows you down, it rewires your expectations. When you consistently choose what feels easy, your tolerance for difficulty decreases. Things that should be manageable start to feel overwhelming. Tasks that require focus begin to feel exhausting. You become more reactive, more distracted, less controlled, not because life got harder, but because you trained yourself to operate at a lower level of resistance. This is where most people collapse. They want results that require discomfort, but they refuse to endure the process that produces those results. They want discipline without pressure, success without sacrifice, control without effort. That contradiction guarantees failure, because the reality is simple: everything valuable sits on the other side of discomfort. Not occasionally, always. Discomfort is not the enemy, it's the signal. It tells you exactly where growth is available. When something feels difficult, that's not a reason to avoid it. That's a reason to move toward it. That resistance you feel is not a barrier. It's an indicator that you're stepping outside your current limits. And that's the only place where expansion happens. There's a clear difference between those who build control and those who stay stuck. Controlled individuals don't run from discomfort. They expect it. They understand that every meaningful action will come with some level of resistance. They don't interpret that resistance as a warning to stop. They interpret it as confirmation that they're on the right path. That shift in perception changes everything. You need to start treating comfort as a liability, not a goal. The more you seek it, the weaker your discipline becomes. The more you avoid it, the stronger your control gets. This isn't about making life unnecessarily difficult. It's about refusing to let ease dictate your behavior. You choose actions based on value, not on how they feel in the moment. There's also a compounding effect here. When you repeatedly expose yourself to discomfort, your tolerance increases. What once felt difficult becomes manageable. What once felt impossible becomes routine. You build resilience, focus, and mental strength, not through theory, but through repeated exposure. And once that threshold shifts, you operate at a level most people can't sustain. But if you continue choosing comfort, the opposite happens. Your tolerance shrinks, your discipline weakens, your control disappears, and you start living a life dictated by ease, not intention. That's how potential gets wasted. Not through lack of ability, but through a constant preference for what feels good instead of what actually matters. You keep overwhelming yourself by thinking you need to fix everything at once. Your entire life, your habits, your mindset, all of it, that's exactly why you stay stuck. Because the moment the task feels too big, your brain shuts down and looks for escape. You don't fail because you lack ability. You fail because you're trying to control outcomes instead of controlling the moment directly in front of you. Everything you want, discipline, success, control, power, it doesn't exist in the future. It exists in a single decision. The next one, that's where everything is decided. Not in long-term plans, not in grand strategies, but in the immediate action you either take or avoid. You don't build a controlled life by thinking about it. You build it by dominating one moment at a time, repeatedly, without exception. Right now, you're either in control of this moment or you're not. There's no middle ground. You're either doing what needs to be done or you're drifting. And drifting is dangerous because it feels neutral, but it's not. It's slow failure. It's quiet, unnoticed, but it compounds just like discipline does. Every moment you let slip becomes a pattern, and that pattern becomes your default behavior. The reason this concept is so powerful is because it removes complexity. You don't need to figure out your entire life today. You don't need perfect clarity about the future. You don't need to feel ready. All you need is to take control of what's in front of you. The task you're avoiding, the decision you're delaying, the action you keep pushing back. That's the battlefield, not tomorrow, not next week. Now, most people underestimate how much control they actually have in a single moment. They think change requires massive effort, when in reality, it requires immediate action. The gap between who you are and who you want to become is not as wide as you think. It's just repeated across time. Close that gap once, then again, and suddenly you're operating at a completely different level. There's also a psychological shift that happens when you focus on the moment. You stop being distracted by outcomes you can't control. You stop worrying about results that haven't happened yet. Your energy becomes concentrated. Your attention sharpens. You become more precise, more deliberate. And that precision is what creates consistency. Not bursts of effort, but sustained control. High-level performers live in this state. They don't scatter their focus across everything they need to achieve. They narrow it down to what must be done right now. And they execute with full intent. No hesitation. No delay. They trust that if they dominate enough moments, the bigger picture will take care of itself. And it always does. You need to adopt the same approach. Stop waiting for the perfect plan. Stop trying to feel prepared. Stop overthinking what comes next. None of that matters if you can't control what's happening right now. Because if you can't dominate the present, you have no chance of controlling the future. This is where most people break. Not because the task is impossible, but because they lack the ability to stay present and act decisively. They drift into distraction, they hesitate, they let the moment pass. And once it's gone, it's gone. You don't get it back. Control is built in real time. It's built in the seconds where you choose action over delay, focus over distraction, discipline over comfort. Stack enough of those decisions and you don't just improve, you transform. So here's the reality. You need to accept nobody is coming to fix you. There is no perfect moment. There is no magical breakthrough. There is only the next decision and the one after that. And the one after that, you either start taking control of those moments or you stay exactly where you are, average, undisciplined, replaceable. Make your choice. Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready. Right now.